Okay, so in my anxiousness to finish this long, very, very long biurim, um, I left out an important piece. So I think I'm going to go back a little bit um, and just pull out some more important information. This whole section of the biurim, Rav Stern is discussing under what circumstances Amir al-Akum is usher in order to get a non-Jew to schlep a burden using two animals that would constitute what we call shatnez. In other words, this is another area of halacha where you're in violation of the Torah by using farm animals in a certain prohibited way. So the case that we're dealing with is through chasima, through muzzling the animal. But there's another way that you can violate the law of utilizing animals as beasts of burden without muzzling them, and that is to strap a horse or a donkey together with an ox. If you plow with them or you use them as beasts of burden, but together, the Torah says that this is prohibited. Now, it's not clear what the reason for the prohibition is. It's considered to be shatnez, which is the same prohibition as mixing wool and linen together. So at first glance, it seems to be a chok. Although with animals, it's maybe a little bit easier to understand that when animals are harnessed together of two different species, it could create additional discomfort for the animal to have to try to keep up with an animal that has a different kind of stride and doesn't walk the same way that it does and has a different temperament than it does, et cetera, et cetera. So that could be the reason, but ultimately we'll have to leave it as a chok. But we saw an apparent machlokus between the Pri Megadim and the Chavos Yair, and Rav Stern said it's not really a machlokus. The Pri Megadim was talking about using your own animal when you know that a Gentile is going to be using it for schlepping. And the Chavos Yair's case was where a Gentile is using his own animals to schlep for you. Okay, so that's the distinction that he was drawing at the beginning of this. And the Chavos Yair, Rav Bachrach of the 18th century, had suggested that if you tell a Gentile, do me a favor, I have this log in the middle of the river, I need to get it out, bring it over to my land. And the guy says, well, all I have is a horse and an ox, I'm going to have to use both of them. You say to him, that's fine, go ahead and use that. Then you're not in violation of Amir al-Nachri because you're not instructing him, you're not benefiting directly from that effort of harnessing the animals together. You don't care which animals he uses, is essentially the argument that's being utilized, even though those are the only two animals that he has. And Vilich Ora, Matzanu Tana de Messiah Lashita Sachavos Yair. And it would seem that we have a support for the opinion of the Chavos Yair. Mehad de Kasa Mishnah Bura b'Simin Reish Ayin Vav. The Mishnah Bura addresses this issue. Of course, Amir al-Nachri is most prominent in Hilchos Shabbos, more so than any other area of halach. The Gam Lamasha Kasa v'Shulchan Aruch Sham Seif Gimel Dim Amar LaAbda Olashif Chasau Sheyelchu Imu V'Hidliku Esaner. That the Shulchan Aruch writes that if you instruct a non-Jewish employee on Shabbos, please come with me, I need to go get something that's in the dark, and the non-Jew lights a lantern and accompanies you, Tezem Mikri Litzarach HaYisrael Va'asur Lo Lehanos Mizer. So the Shulchan Aruch writes that that's exclusively for the utility of the Jew. In other words, the non-Jewish housekeeper turned on the light or lit the lantern, knowing that I needed to walk through the dark to get something, so she did it for me. I'm therefore not allowed to benefit, because that's one of the halachas of Amir al-Nachri, is that even without telling them anything about lighting a candle, if she's doing it exclusively for you, you're not, and you wouldn't be able to see otherwise, you're not allowed to benefit from the light that she turns on for you. The afal pi shegam hagoy tzarech lazeh, einza mikri litzarcham keven shikar halicha hu litzarech Yisrael. And the argument goes like this, that even though she's lighting it for herself as much as she's lighting it for you because you've asked her to accompany you, but at the same time, she wouldn't have accompanied you unless you had asked her to. So therefore, the candle lighting is exclusive, or the lantern lighting is exclusively for you. Because of all that, because in other words, we know that there's a halacha that if a Gentile does something for themselves, you're allowed to benefit from it. It's just that if they do it for you, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So because of all that, Mishnah Berurah Sham Sifkatan Chavzayin Divamaso Lelechimo V'Zelasham. So Mishnah Berurah on that halacha writes, Dafka Nakat, be very careful about this, the circumstances, he says. Because if you send your housekeeper, you tell her, Maria, please go and get something from that room that's where it's dark, and she goes herself to get it, and and she turns on the light, or she turns on the lantern or the flashlight, whatever it is, in order to give herself the ability to see, that's not considered for the Jew's sake. He says, even though the whole reason she's walking through the dark is for the Jew, but she's turning on the light for herself, not for the Jew. Because in this instance, the Jew is not benefiting from the light that she's lighting. She's the only one benefiting from it. In the previous example of the Shulchan Aruch, where I'm walking together with her, so both of us are benefiting for the light, because that this helps me avoid bumping into things in the dark. But if she's going herself, so then she's the only one benefiting from it. And therefore, let's say she were to put the lantern down afterwards, a Jew would be allowed to benefit from that lantern since she turned it on for herself and not for anyone else. Hold on. Yeah, sure. And the Taz writes the same thing, and he says, so let's say you ask Maria to wash the dishes, and it's dark in the kitchen. She has trouble seeing in the kitchen because the lights are off. Lo mikri, or in those days it would be you send her outside to wash the dishes, right, in the trough that's in the backyard, and there's no light there. She goes ahead and lights the lantern. So he says, Lo mikri litzarech Yisrael, kibin shein gufa Yisrael nena min menu. In that situation where she's going herself, it's perfectly fine for her to light the lantern and for you to even benefit from it afterwards, because that's not for your sake, that's for her sake. Elakalim shalom mudachim, even though you're going to benefit indirectly from the fact that your dishes will be washed as a result, but she's nonetheless lighting the lantern for herself. But since she lit it for herself and not for the Jew, to make life easier for her in washing the dishes, so you're allowed to benefit from that lantern afterwards. So he says, "Harei mavur mea Mishnah Berurah desvirule degamim Yisrael omer lenachri leilech lemakom ploni shachashuch sham." So you see that if a Jew instructs a non-Jew to go to a certain place which is dark, v'tzarech lezaner kedei l'kaim shlichus shel Yisrael, and the Gentile needs light in order to fulfill that instruction, that's still not called that the lantern was turned on for the needs of the Jew. And the Jew therefore could afterwards use the lit lantern. Even though the whole reason they turned on the light was to fulfill the instruction of the Jew, but since the candle was not turned on for the sake of the Jew's benefit, it's not called for the benefit of the Jew. So before we go any further, I'll take your question in a second. This is brilliant, because what if I want the light in a certain room turned on, but I know that I'm not allowed to ask the Gentile to to turn on the light, and I'm not allowed to. If they do turn on the light, I'm not allowed to benefit from it. Let's say I want to go into that room and read, and it's Friday night. So here's a solution. I can say, Maria, would you mind going into my to my study? My reading glasses are in there. If you don't mind, I'd like you to get my reading glasses out of my study. So she goes into my study. She turns on the light to find them. She finds my glasses, and then she says, "Okay, I got them." And right before she leaves the study, I say, "Oh, Maria, don't turn off the light, please." Yeah.
Not to do it.
Don't turn off the light, because you're telling her not to do something. And this way, you can go into your study and benefit from the light, because she turned on the light not for your ability to benefit from the light, but from her ability to benefit from the light. So that sounds like a really cool trick, if having a Gentile turn on the light for you.
I'm having some major issues with this based on SCP stuff, because first of all, don't we have to say if she's in a situation where she can't do it without turning on the light, how's that different from the greasy pots, where she has to turn on the light in order to find it? She had to turn on the hot water to clean the greasy pots. I thought we said she has to use the hot water. That's a problem. So it's pitch black and she can't find it. She has to turn the light on.
Okay, so this is a very good question, and I would argue that she could find my spectacles.
You have to be able to say that.
She could find my glasses, but she would have to feel around a little bit, using the moonlight coming into the study, and it might take her a little bit longer.
You have to say that.
Yeah.
That's one aspect. The other thing is, if I recall, the trick that they use to try and get a light on is to say, "There's something there for you. Go downstairs and get a beer."
That's right.
Right? But here we're saying, "Go downstairs and get something for me."
Yeah.
So you didn't have to come on to say, "Go downstairs and get something for yourself." You could say, "Go downstairs and get something for me." So that whole ruse about getting a beer for yourself was unnecessary.
Right. He's talking about a case where I want her to turn on the light for me, and I can tell her, "Have a beer," So you don't even. Right. If you tell her, would you mind bringing me a beer from the fridge that's in the basement, and the light's off there, so she could even bring it for me. That's right.
Just the SCB seems to make a specific point. You have to.
I know. I hear you. Okay. So just realize that, not everyone is on the same page in some of the fine details. Okay. The non-Jew can do what? Ox and a donkey, right? Right. Okay. So, hooray. So this is what we're up to now. Hooray mavur. Okay. So now he says, now let's extrapolate it to the case of the Chavos Yair. V'lichora ze mamash kedino shel hachavos yair desvir leidahol ve'ein ha'Yisrael mishtamish im al kilayim lekov al ha'agala rak shemuva b'shvilo masa. He says, it seems therefore that the case of the Chavos Yair is the Jew says, pull out the log out of the river. So he says the Jew is not getting direct benefit from the horse and the ox saddled together. Like he's not on a wagon that's being drawn by those two animals, but just something is being brought to him that was schlepped by those two animals. The Jew doesn't care how it's being schlepped. Granted that the Jew knows that the only two animals that the Gentile has are a horse and an ox, or a horse and a donkey in this case. then you could argue that it's permitted. Ulam laniastaiti zelesa. However, to me, that doesn't make sense. It's not a good analogy. Dihine mashihiter hataz mikoach hasvara dahadlaka sanir nasa litzarcha below bishvil ha'Yisrael davar zed tzarich biur. He says we need to clarify this idea that the Taz says that she's turning on the light for herself and not for the Jew. That's not so simple to me. The lichora kasha. Madua einza mikri litzarach ha'Yisrael. Why is that not called for the needs of the Jew? Hareim hashivcha lo ha'isa madlika haner lo ha'isa yecholo lishtov esakelim kitikunam. If she didn't turn on the light, she wouldn't be able to wash the dishes properly. V'yotze im kain dahadlakas haner hu muchrach bishvil lasos pulasa. It turns out that the turning on of the lights is necessary in order for her to do her job. The distinction that you wanted to make, Paul. And so since the Jew wants her to do this activity, it seems like her turning on the light was done exclusively for him. He wants to use those washed dishes. So without turning on the light, he can't use those washed dishes. So what that the Jew is not utilizing the candle directly. But he's getting benefit from the lighting of the candle. Because without lighting the candle, he couldn't use the dishes tomorrow. The way we would have to resolve this is to rely on the Pri Megadim's interpretation, that where he says, he says that the Gentile housekeeper is lighting the candle to complete her job, that the utensils will be clean and will be usable even after Shabbos. Just like the Magen Avram wrote in another place. Uperish devarav the hataz lomari alecha shashicha madicha kelim letzorach atzma. Wrote Salomer de mitzad ha'Yisrael lo ichbas leklal emosai shetaz zos. He says, according to what the Pri Megadim is writing, the only reason why it's okay for her to light the candle and then for you to benefit from it afterwards is because she's doing it for her benefit, not for the benefit of the Jew. Meaning the Jew tells her, I'm going to need those dishes on Sunday, not the next day. And she decides on her own initiative that it's more convenient for her to wash the dishes Friday night. So if it's for her sake that she decides to light the candle, I'm allowed to benefit from that candle afterwards. O Shabbos v'boker kodam asuda o bizman acher v'ashivchi cholam mitzido shel Yisrael lasos emasai shetirtza. She can wash the dishes, however, whenever she likes. Kach shem mitzido ein shum hechrech lahadiach es hakelim al yedei chilul Shabbos. Rak hashivcha mitzad atzma rotza lahadicham b'leil Shabbos umadlekas avur zeh ner. He says the reason she's lighting the candle is it's more convenient for her to do it Friday night and not the following day when she won't need to light a candle. Now, it could also be that she could wash the dishes totally fine without a candle, but the candle gives her additional light to make it more convenient. So if it's not absolutely necessary to light the candle in order to get the job done, because she could either always do it at another time, or she can get it done without lighting the candle, and it's just out of convenience. So then we would argue that there's no amira l'nachri in that case. She's not lighting the candle for the sake of the Jew, she's lighting it for her convenience, and therefore the Jew can benefit from that lantern or the lit room afterwards, right? So in the example of where I say to Maria, would you mind getting me my glasses, right, from the study, you have to say that she could get the glasses in order for this to be permitted. And that's the reason why in the SCP example, you tell her, have a beer, it's on me, because that way it's fully for her. But if it's, so we would argue, if she could get the glasses for her, without having to turn on the light, right? Because there's enough light from from other rooms or from the outside for her to find the glass. I told her, please get the glasses. They're on my desk. And she goes downstairs or goes to my study, and she gets the glasses and turns on the light in the process. So so if she does that, so then I can tell her, Maria, don't turn off the lights. Okay, so that would be another good example. So basically, so then when we get to he says Ulafiza, just skipping down. Ulafi divrei ha primagadim yotze dim rotze ha Yisrael yishtamish im hakelim b'leil Shabbos o Shabbos b'baboker miyad b'hascholat b'tchilas hayom v'i efshel hadicham b'leil Shabbos rakim ha'akum yadlik haner da'aser. So then it'll turn out that if I need those dishes Shabbos morning, first thing in the morning, and she doesn't have any other time to wash them other than Friday night, and I explained that to her, so then it would be prohibited for me to instruct her to wash the dishes, since there's no other way for her to do it without turning on a light, without doing malacha. She can't get the work done without violating Shabbos. She can't do it without turning on the light. He says, therefore, we have to conclude that when the Mishnah Berurah writes that I tell Maria to go and get me something from a dark room, and she turns the light on, we're talking about where they can go fetch the item without turning on a lantern. Right? The fact that they turned on a lantern is because they're scared of the dark or some other reason, but it's not because it can only be done through the lighting of a ner. So he says, but everything seems to work out now, right? You feel better. Good. Okay.
There has to be another way to do it.
Oh, so that's the issue. That's really why we're discussing this whole discussion is because really it's going to turn out that we're going to end up paskening not like the Chavos Yair. Chavos Yair is too lenient in this case, according to most poskim, is that if I know that the only way that I can get the log out is by having him saddle his ox and his donkey together, or his horse and donkey together, two different animals from two different species, then it's not going to be permitted. He says, and therefore he says, so we're not going to, it'll be prohibited to tell a Gentile to schlep that burden, schlep that log from a certain place, if the Jew knows that the only types of animals that the Gentile has at his disposal will require him to saddle two different species together. And he's going to have to use the prohibition of kilayim in order to do that. So if the Gentile has multiple animals, and he could always saddle together two horses together, but or he could use just one animal, but instead he uses two animals and they're kilayim. So then, because it's easier for him or it's more convenient for him, so the Jew doesn't care. He doesn't need it to get the job done. Then the Jew can benefit from it. But if the Gentile only has a horse and a donkey, and the only way to complete the job is to use both animals, He says, then you're not allowed to tell the Gentile to schlep the item for you. And we can also demonstrate this from another place in the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Shabbos. The Kaimelon the Akum shehevi mayim derech rishus harabim asal Yisrael lehanos mizah. That if a Gentile schleps water through a public thoroughfare for the sake of a Jew, the Jew may not benefit from that water. Alma da'af hecha shirak hahaba ha'isa be'isr. So you see that even where the schlepping was done in a prohibited fashion, even though the Jew didn't get any benefit directly from the schlepping, but only the end product he got benefit from. So yeshbo isser hana. The Ramah actually says that some people are lenient, since the Jew could always walk to where the water is and benefit from the water without having it schlepped through Rishus Harabim for him. But that's only if the Jew has the ability to go to where the water is to drink. But if the Jew doesn't have the ability or would never do it himself, it's not reasonable to assume that he would go and walk there, maybe because it's a dangerous neighborhood or because of any other reason, because it's difficult for him to walk or whatever. He says then it's going to be usher to benefit from the water that the Gentile schleps for him. And the similar thing is that to wash dishes in the water where, or to any other use, that you couldn't do without schlepping the water to you. Let's say there's a well that's far away and you need water to wash the dishes. So then obviously you're not going to wash the dishes in the well. So therefore the schlepping of the water was done for the sake of the Jew, and therefore you can't benefit from it. And everyone therefore will agree with this whole halacha that you're not allowed to benefit from malacha that was done in order to get the job done. Okay. And therefore, so this is what we saw. This was the conclusion that we read yesterday, that if there are social halls or hotels that wash the dishes, where the workers wash the dishes on Shabbos, he says, according to what we've just read, if the Gentile can get the job done without violating Shabbos, they can wash the floor with nylon instead of a mop. This is what we saw yesterday. As long as they can get the job done without doing malacha, and if they just want to do the malacha of squeezing, let's say, for their own convenience, so then you're allowed to instruct them to mop the floor or to wash the dishes. So that's really the whole point of this exercise, was to address the case of Lechavos Yair. So the bottom line is if you know that the only way he can get the job done is to do something prohibited, whether it's muzzling the animal or schlepping or saddling two different species together, you're not allowed to go ahead and do that, and you wouldn't be allowed to benefit from the malacha that he's done. Okay, so. All right, so I think we have a little bit more clarity now on this whole issue. And what we'll do hopefully is I'm hoping to be able to finish the Siman Yud Aleph, either tomorrow or Friday. Okay? Okay. It all came together. So we have one more Seif in the Siman. Okay. So we'll hold it here for today. Have a great day.